Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Nelson Freitas with us today. He is founder and CEO at Unknowns. Spent his time at various organizations. I see Omnicon, I see Wonderman as CSO, Chief Strategy Officer. It's not his first company. He's been a founder before. He's a brand strategist, a modern marketer, thought leader. Who believes in the power of brands to shape culture and change the world. So I guess we're going to discuss about that today. Podpire.com is presenting this podcast. That's my podcasting agency. If you want to start your podcast, monetize it through AdSense, through sponsors, and through lead generation, you can go to podpire.com. We have a free ebook teaching you how to do that. Nelson, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Awesome. Thanks, Charles, and thanks for having me on. I think you did such a great job of summarizing my story. I've worked pretty much in big agencies, some smaller creative shops, and largely in New York City. I'm a resident of Los Angeles now, and I've worked myself all the way up to Global Chief Strategy Officer. I held that role for 12 years straight. And then at the end of like 2023, at the beginning of 2023, I just decided that I kind of had petered out in the corporate world. I was just kind of trying to find my role and my footing, and I just decided to just venture out on my own and serve a need in the marketplace that I was increasingly seeing that wasn't being served.
Right. So yeah, the nemesis of Unknowns, I guess, yeah, you've seen a need, but also felt the need to leave corporate after so much time there. It's not your first company, right? But was it a shock for you to come back to the entrepreneurial world and have to hustle for clients? How was the transition?
Well, you know what? Initially the transition, I think when you're in a corporate environment, your remit is often, you're in one lane and you do that one lane. And all of a sudden I had to think about so many other things. I had to, think about cash flow and meetings and setting things up, which was a completely different, was a completely new thing for me. But what I enjoyed the most was it enabled me to focus on what I really, really love to do. I love to solve brand problems for clients. And increasingly in the corporate world, I felt like I was getting pulled in so many other directions. Often things that, weren't my sweet spot that you often have to do in the corporate world, that just wasn't exciting for me. And I just didn't enjoy it. And Unknowns is, it's my thing and my baby. And my whole thing is solving clients' problems in interesting, disruptive ways, which in many instances had evaporated from the corporate world because, we played it safe. Sometimes we put more process in place than we needed to. There were so many roadblocks to doing really amazing breakthrough strategy. And I wanted to do it differently and in my own setting where I can give that kind of thinking to clients.
And why is brand important? And if you can describe also precisely ways that you've been leveraging innovation and disruption to reinvent some of these dying brands, some of these boring companies out there, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. I always equate brand with, in my opinion, and it's gotten reduced to your best business asset. It's the one thing that you have in your arsenal that should protect your reputation, should facilitate some sorts of relationship and loyalty with your customer base, should really be a key piece of your business. And if something, lo and behold, happens to your business, your brand should protect you. It's like a vaccine that you're protected against, a mishap that you might do, or a product that just doesn't go over well. And I find that so many clients now don't invest in their brand, in a very unique story about them, in something emotive that people can connect with. It's become so transactional and so bottom funnel optimization that brands with heart and soul or humanity tend to be washed out or assumed to be not useful and productive in the business world, and nothing could be further from the truth. So that's how I've been really injecting disruption. I'm trying to perhaps have businesses and brands think less about transactional, lower funnel optimization, performance, all these things that I understand are useful to your business, but it may not drive the emotional connection that you ultimately desire from the relationship between your brand and your consumer. And the brands I love the most, and I'm sure the brands you love the most, we have an emotional reaction to those brands. We don't buy them purely on a transactional basis. And sometimes that stuff gets overlooked today, where everything seems so short term and driving that bottom line and ROI. And I always like to say, just because you can't see it immediately doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or your brand isn't going to bear fruit after that.
Let's take me as an example. Although I'm not your ICP, you probably work with bigger corporations. I'm all about truth and authenticity. That's why I just recently started looking the brand equation, right? Like, how should I portray myself if I'm just being myself on a daily basis? But then I understood, yeah, that might be looking bad. But for example, right now, this face of mine, I haven't modified that face. Maybe I chose the Sennheiser headphones, maybe this shirt, but it seems I don't give much shits about brands. Maybe I should. I love the color black. I love simplicity. I love keeping it zen. So I prompted a brand GPT not so long ago to coach me on brand and to keep me on brand so that I'm not all over the place. Is that the right first step to do so? Is the first step usually a brand audit? Like, what would you recommend in my case?
Yeah, I think the first step is a brand audit. And I have a very simple way of doing it, which is why my company is called Unknowns. I often find that the things we don't know or we don't surface about our brand or even a person are often the things that are the most powerful for us. The first place I start when I start working with clients is I go to their origin story. Whether the brand is 150 years old or 5 years old or 2 years old, there is a fundamental reason that brand started. It found a need in the marketplace. The founder or founders saw a need and then created something and built a set of values, beliefs, a promise, something that they wanted to ultimately fulfill on. And over time, that origin story, value set, gets either lost, gets murky, just you lose it because it's just like everyday business happens. So I always go back there because I feel like it's, to your point, the most authentic, natural, true place to start because that's where you want to be. You do not want to be that brand that doesn't do that hard work of looking inside yourself to find out what is my origin story, forgets all that, sees kind of a cool trend or sees another brand and either copies that other brand or latches itself onto a trend that may or may not belong to it. Like these kind of short-term fixes that aren't ownable to anybody, that's when I feel like you go off the rails. It's like if you and I were best friends and I came to you and I said, Charles, I've lost my way. I'm not quite sure what I should be doing. Your initial reaction probably wouldn't be, whatever, go read that book and just copy that. Your initial reaction would probably, hey man, dig deep inside, find out what you're really good at, your truth and what your origin, and bring out that to the world. Because frankly, if you start there, it's already original because it's yours. So I always go to a brand's fundamental truth and origin story and move out from that, whether that brand is 5 years old, 2 years old, 2 months, or 200 years. That's my natural starting point.
Yeah, and then how can we make that second nature? Can we automate our brand? Is it just like selecting the colors in Canvas or prompting GPT in some way so that it only returns images that look that way? Can we like almost set it and forget it, or it's always something that you're sort of manually working on?
despite me trying every sort of AI platform, I feel like their brain doesn't work as well as mine does.
Well, that's normal. Yeah.
And I'm not being boastful. I feel like the art of brand building and brand strategy carries two elements to it. One is, as you said, very analytical. It needs to. But the other one is taking a strategic leap and an idea that kind of looks at that origin story and sets it to the future. And I find that when you set it and leave it alone, eventually either somebody catches up to you and starts saying the same thing, because that's just the way brands work, or you're constantly not keeping it fresh, so you get lost in the shuffle. So I always like, for me, it's a very manual thing. I'm thinking about it all the time, and I'm evolving it constantly without using its origin story. I do find that as soon as you put it out of sight, out of mind, you'll wake up and you'll say, what happened? I feel like everybody's caught up. Everybody's saying the same things as me. Like, I mean, you pick any category, the brands kind of all sound the same. We have a tough time distinguishing them. And the whole point is never to lose sight of that. So you're constantly, a step ahead or a click ahead of everybody else, and really owning your story.
How do you find your clients nowadays? Is it mostly referrals, and how do you include branding if you do some outreach? Do you have like your own specific voice, words to use or words not to use?
In terms of places, I do my own outreach. I go to conferences. I meet with clients. I talk to people. I use LinkedIn. I basically use every tool the majority of people would use. My trick is I don't overly. I credentialize myself. You can go to my website and you can see our things. But as soon as I engage a client, I always start engaging that client the way it would be like working with me, or working with unknowns in my company. I'm already in their problem. I'm not talking about constantly my cases, my things, my process, because that's not helpful to them. I want to be in their category, their problems, solving their problems. So from day one or day two, I'm already working on their behalf and building their brand and trying to solve their problems versus, trying to validate myself. I'm assuming if a client wants to talk to me, they've either looked at my website, they know me from a past experience. So I've already been credentialized, so to speak. So I want to credentialize myself through them, not through myself. I guess it's the way I look at new business.
Right. And then do you provide them pieces of content of value before they actually take the decision to hire you for a couple of grands per month?
It depends on the client. Some clients are like, I've got something, let's get going because we've said enough. Or I'm always keen on discussing how they see brands, how they see the world, what they're looking for, and giving my opinion immediately, so that we're already engaging in a conversation to make sure that we're going to be a good fit. I want to make sure that the clients I select are really going to align with my values, and I'm going to align with theirs. I like to say unknowns is a little bit more the disruptive choice rather than the safe choice. We could do safe work, but I'm a firm believer in, which is why I initially started the company, that there were so many brands out there that sounded the same. Everything sounded the same and was vanilla. And most brands are either forgotten, ignored, and people could care less. So I didn't want to put brands in that space. I wanted to take them out of that space. And sometimes when you want to take a brand out of that space, they need to be willing to, just jump outside their comfort zone a little bit. And that tends to be us more than, okay, just keep doing what everybody else is doing, but just do it slightly better, kind of a thing.
So I guess brand is not just only how you look, but also how you select others by their looks. If there's a value fit, like you said, right?
Yeah, because I don't want to I don't want to mislead my clients. I have a very sharp point of view. I believe that disruptive brand thinking that really is charts a new course for a brand or pushes it outside of the space is the way to go. Um, I'm not a big believer in let's just analyze the categories best practices and you do those category best practices. I've always thought that that's a recipe for disaster and wasting your money because you're going to emulate everybody else and sound like everybody else, and who wants that? So that's not my stock and trade. So I'm very clear about that because I want to take a company from here to here. Your categories cluttered as the majority of them are. You're a bit of an inflection point. How do you pivot out of it? And I want to help you pivot out of it. I'm not helping you pivot out of it for the sake of pivoting out of it. I'm helping you pivot out of it so you could attract a new, younger audience, so you could refresh your point of view, so you could, reconnect with your origin story, so you can set yourself up for the future where, your customers are looking for different things. My lens is through a business lens, not just, I'm doing it. I'm connecting you to the business world, not simply doing it for,
Yeah, I love
fun
that.
thing.
Yeah, I guess some executives, they want some vanilla stuff, and some agencies just take advantage of that and give them the classic. In that space, it seems to me that it's tough to calculate the ROI of a brand makeover. Am I right in saying that? Like, how do you calculate the actual ROI in rebranding a company like that?
I completely agree. I completely agree with you. If you and I were to look at big banks in the United States, I don't know about you, I would have a tough time, sure, distinguishing the big players one from the other. They kind of all trade on the same things, one stop, 4.3% AP. It's just like we know the recipe book quite well. Even consumers, I'm sure, know the recipe book quite well. I think if you're a bank and you're going to redo all that, well, good luck to you. I don't know what kind of, unless you're a big player and you just want to keep the status quo as is because the status quo as is benefits you, then that's good for you. I want to shift you outside of that. That being said, I do a ton of research to make sure that I'm looking for the areas that are going to have the most traction for brands, and things like an old-fashioned tracking study, business results, who's your target that you are attracting and you want to attract. I really get into the data and use that to really build a brand around the data, particularly tracking studies like when you look at how well a brand ranks relative to its competition, what it owns versus its competition, where it's its strength versus its weakness. I like to make decisions that are sound based on that because that's the responsible thing to do. And then if I come up with something, I usually come up with a handful of options. I like to evaluate them and test them with a variety of stakeholders, both quantitatively and qualitatively, because I want to project how it's going to perform in the market. Because yeah, I see brand as a powerful entity, but I see it as a business and growth engine equally as a way to differentiate you. And if it doesn't drive growth, then it's useless, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a long play as well. And in my size of business, it's a nice exit strategy, right? It's packaging it all up together, sort of. Regarding the bank example that you just named, it made me think, because my bank, my Silly Desjardins Bank in Quebec, got a rebrand as of late, and they look all new, they look all cool. But I think the biggest brand factor in the end is product, right? It's the product that you give. So however good you may look on the surface, if your product is shit, you sort of look disingenuous and dishonest of like, hey, here's how we want to look, but in the end, that's how we actually serve our clients. Do you agree with that? And what would be a remedy to this?
I agree. Often marketing is not a good cover up for, particularly in a banking scenario, for a bad product or bad service. It's very hard to cover that up. It is a good way to help focus on your strengths. So if your strength is your product and not necessarily your service, hone in on your product. If your strength is your service, hone in on your service. Whatever it might be, and play that up. It's like any human being. That's what to overcome. Which is why I always go back to your origin story. That's your core strength and what differentiates you. Now pull that out, and how well does that represent your product and service relative to the competition? And how do you create a narrative around that that's truthful but yet insightful, to drive choice and preference? But I agree with you. Marketing is not a good way to it's not about being shady. It's about telling a powerful story in a human, interesting way, to help drive your reputation and short-term and long-term growth. Really, those are the ones that do it exceptionally well.
And what if I need to run. Someone just arrived at the door. I have so many other questions for you, but till then, where can people find out more about you, Nelson?
Yes. Okay. So my company is called Group Unknowns. We're based in New York City and in Los Angeles, and it is Group Unknowns. So we have a really awesome website, and then my name is Nelson Freitas, and I have a well-developed LinkedIn site. So hit me up there if you want to talk more.
Thank you, Nelson. So